You ever meet someone who believes control is kindness? Who thinks if they measure you enough, length of your grass, angle of your mailbox, number of guests on your porch, they'll finally feel safe? That was Martha Keene, not a villain in a cape. Something quieter, a devotion to rules so fierce it became a religion. And the rest of us were the congregation who forgot we could stand up and walk out. She didn't walk, she inspected. She didn't greet, she evaluated. The clipboard wasn't a tool. It was a crown. 4 years, Willow Bend played along. We learned to breathe quietly, to smile under fines, to apologize for wind chimes. And then, one quiet Saturday morning, Martha found herself in front of my house, me, with dew still cooling on the lawn and steam lifting from my coffee. Click, the sound of her camera. Click, another photo of my mailbox like it had confessed to a crime. Morning, I tried. Something wrong. You're in violation, she said, the satisfaction of a fixed script. Of what? Reflective numbering not compliant with HOA brightness standards. It would have been funny if it weren't real. Brightness standards? It's a mailbox, not a runway light. Rules are rules, she said, writing as if the pen were a gavel. Expect formal notice. By Wednesday, the notices arrived, each sheet a small brick in a wall she was building around us, improper trash bin placement, unapproved exterior shade, and my favorite, hosting unauthorized social gatherings. I remember holding that last letter the way you hold a dead bird, gently, because you don't know what else to do. Let it go, Sarah said. She feeds on reaction. Don't feed her. But Martha wasn't enforcing order. She was testing the perimeter of our obedience. And each time no one pushed back, she stepped closer. People like her don't run on logic. They run on the hum of submission. A month later, the universe offered her a stage and lights. Sarah's new work car slid into the driveway. Sleek black, government plates, tinted like a secret. It hummed power even when the engine was off. I knew it would draw eyes. I didn't know it would draw a tow truck. Heels on pavement. Clipboard alive. That's a commercial vehicle, she announced. It's federal, I said evenly. Then it must be registered with the HOA. It's federal property. Then I'll have it towed. She smiled when she said it. A small, private smile people wear when they think the world is finally behaving. 15 minutes later, the tow truck rounded the corner, diesel coughing, chains talking in metal consonants. Curtains fluttered on both sides of the street. Willow Bend had always loved the show. We were just never allowed to choose the movie. You the owner? The driver asked. Homeowner, I said. But the car? It says it's unauthorized. He pointed with his chin to the queen at the curb. Sarah turned the corner at that moment, stepped out, and the afternoon temperature seemed to drop 2 degrees. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You're attempting to tow federal property, she told Martha, holding a badge that caught the light and turned it into consequence. Excuse me. This vehicle belongs to the Inspector General's office. Interfering is obstruction. Silence is an instrument. The neighborhood has never learned to play it as beautifully as it did then. The driver swallowed. Yeah, no. You're paying for this call-out. Lady. He rehooked his chain and left like a man deciding not to get electrocuted. Color left Martha like the tide. Her smile stayed, but brittle, like it had been printed and laminated. You would think embarrassment humbles. It doesn't. It's gasoline. The next morning, a new letter, an authorized vehicle. The day after, overgrown hedges. Then excessive holiday lighting. In April, which felt like performance art. I stopped arguing. I started listening. Paper has a sound when it stacks. It's the sound of a case ripening. I made folders. Digital, physical, a private museum of small tyrannies. Photos, timestamps, emails with greetings that sounded like verdicts. When Sarah reached out to City Housing Compliance, she didn't send a complaint. She sent a documentary. 2 weeks later, white city SUVs slid into Willow Bend like teeth. Inspectors in vests. Clipboards thicker than hairs. They went straight to her door. Our cul-de-sac performed its favorite sport, pretending not to watch while watching everything. After an hour, they left. On her porch, Martha, pale, trembling, hands welded to her clipboard. The first time a queen learns a crown is heavy is always visible in the shoulders. That evening, an email like a bell. Effective immediately, Martha Keene has been removed as HOA president pending investigation. The neighborhood exhaled. The air felt a fraction warmer. Dogs barked without guilt. A porch laughed. It was small, but it was ours. But there are always bones under the garden. The audit opened a drawer marked Beautification Projects. Invoices with a fragrant specificity, irrigation upgrades, fence repairs, seasonal flora. A company with a name cone to blend in, Willow Bend Beautification, LLC. Ownership records that didn't even bother to blush, Martha Keene. 3 years, $4,000 to $7,000. Repairs to places that never owned a hammer. When the city froze her account, Martha called for an emergency board meeting. Her vice president, Bill, let it ring out. Her allies vanished like shadows at noon. Respect is a currency you only think you have until the lights come on and the register is empty. The morning of the warrant, the sky felt clean. Sirens, blue and red swallowed by the polished faces of garage doors. Officers at her door, polite the way doctors are polite before surgery. I was trimming hedges, and my hands kept working, because it's strange how the body chooses normal motions to survive abnormal moments. She came out in her cardigan and pearls, as if dressing like a greeting card could change the plot. The clipboard was still there, pressed to her like a book she'd never finished. Handcuffs are quieter than movies make them. The loudest thing was the wind. She once measured my grass with a ruler, a neighbor whispered. Another, she fined me for a winter wreath. Everyone had a small scar, a familiar ache. We stood with them together like a choir that knew the song without rehearsal. There was no cheering, no cruelty, just a silence of justice, the sound you make when the right thing happens and you choose to honor it by not making it cheap. That night, the group chat became a carnival. Memes, jokes, relief shaped like laughter. Someone wrote, "The witches left the cul-de-sac." I laughed too, and then I stopped. It wasn't the witch leaving. It was a spell. We got to work. The neighborhood found a version of itself it had buried for safety. Kids chalked the sidewalk for galaxies. Someone strung lights across a porch in July and dared the night to be unhappy about it. A garage door went bright blue and made the street look like it had a heartbeat. We started calling this place Willow Bend 2.0. No rules, agreements. No bored neighbors. You learn quickly what freedom smells like. Paint and charcoal and grass. Time moved like a season you could finally feel. The house at the end of the street, Hayes, went on the market with a listing that had the audacity to call us a quiet community, and I tried not to laugh at the sentence that was technically true for all the wrong reasons. I saw Martha once more before she left town. Grocery store discounts. She waited in line holding coupons like a cloak. I saw a woman, not a crown. No clipboard. Shoulders curved around a private weather system. Our eyes met. There was no battle to win. It was like watching a radio fade out a station you'd never liked but had learned the lyrics to by force. She turned away. Silence again. The kind you don't celebrate, just witness. The young couple who bought the house arrived with a truck that felt like a parade. Sunflower yellow shutters appeared, and the afternoon remembered what colors for. They hung wind chimes, and every breeze brought a small music that sounded like a smile punctuated out loud. They let the grass go wild at the edges like an apology to nature. I brought cookies, told them the short version. We laughed like there had never been a long one. You'd think that's where the story ends. It doesn't. Not because she comes back to reign, but because communities don't heal by subtraction. We needed to make something together, not just remove something. The HOA board dissolved in paperwork that felt like a reverse ceremony. In the empty room where policies used to sleep, we planted the start of a community garden. The soil was stubborn like memories are, but it took. Neighbors who had only nodded for years stood shoulder to shoulder naming vegetables like they were children. Raj grew tomatoes that tasted like August. Tasha, a nurse and single mom at the corner lot, taught us to coax Basil into generosity. Hank, retired Army, who never smiled for cameras, began to smile for dote. Rules are rules. Someone joked one evening, holding a packet of seeds. Nah, I said, hey, it's agreements. What's the difference? Agreements are made with people in the room. Some nights, After the garden watered itself with the black holes under a pink sky, Sarah and I sat on our porch and listened to the wind chimes, a soft sentence ending the day. Peace is not silence. It's unafraid sound. Then came the part of the movie no one makes posters for, paperwork that keeps moving. The investigation widened. The city called Sarah. They needed sworn statements, timeline confirmations. It turned out falsified invoices weren't the only trick in the drawer. There were special assessments that funded pet projects that only existed in spreadsheets. There were late fee structures that piled interest like bricks on the same three families until they sold. It wasn't just theft, it was engineering outcomes. A civil action followed the criminal one. Restitution, prohibited roles, training mandates for any future board in our county. You don't know how tired you are until the system finally moves in your direction, and your bones realize they can put the weight down. Bill, the vice president who had once echoed every rule is rule, showed up to a neighborhood meeting under the pergola, apologizing with his hands. He'd signed things he hadn't read because he trusted a rhythm he mistook for leadership. "I thought I was helping," he said, and it landed like a stone in a pond. Ripples, not rage. We didn't absolve him. We didn't hang him. We gave him Tuesday afternoons in the garden and Saturday mornings fixing fences he'd voted to fine. Consequence makes a better neighbor than revenge. A local reporter came by in sandals and sincerity, asking for quotes with a notepad that looked like the first page of a new book. We told her pieces. Not to make a hero out of anyone. To make a map. Communities love maps. It lets us walk somewhere on purpose. Here's the map we offered. When power stops listening, build a mirror. When enforcement becomes identity, build a community that reflects another way to be safe. When someone mistakes control for love, show them a place where love looks like a soccer ball skidding across chalk stars and somebody's father clapping in a yard with too many dandelions. The court date felt like a rainy Tuesday even though the sun was indecently bright. Martha sat with a lawyer who used words like structures and misunderstandings and administrative oversight, and the judge wore the expression of a person who'd lived on planet Earth. Figures were read, timelines, receipts with invisible ink that the city had learned to make speak. There was a moment when the judge asked if she had anything to say. Martha stood. Her voice was careful the way people are careful with glass. "I was trying to preserve standards," she said, and for a second the room flashed with the past, decorations measured, letters folded, doorbells rung with righteousness. "I see now I overreached." Overreach is a small word for a large shape, but it was the only word she could carry. Restitution was ordered. A prohibition on leadership roles for a term that felt like a chapter, not a sentence. Community service hours. Training. It wasn't triumph. It was a straightened picture frame in a house that had needed more than a frame fixed. We walked out not cheering, not angry, just aligned. The next months don't make it into most stories because they don't click. They settle. A neighborhood doesn't heal in headlines. It heals in small returns to ordinary. Hank teaching kids to ride a bike without training wheels on the same sidewalk where people had once measured a quadrant where a Halloween pumpkin could sit. Tasha starting a babysitting exchange so night shift parents could sleep in a house without worry. Raj and his wife, Priya, hosting a Saturday chai that rolled into sunset with music older than any of our fences. We learned to ask before deciding. We learned that a barking dog at 10 p.m. is a problem solved faster with a knock and a laugh than a notice and a fine. We learned the wind can be trusted to move a wind chime without supervision. One evening, a minivan we didn't recognize slowed near the garden. A woman stepped out with a small box. Martha, no pearls, no cardigan, a sweater that had been washed into softness. She didn't cross the low fence. Her hands gripped the box like it might fly away. "I brought something," she said, voice careful again. The garden paused. I glanced at Sarah. Sarah glanced at me. Nobody moved her away. I walked to the edge. She held up heirloom seeds, envelopes labeled in a hand that was, for the first time, not a signature but a story. Brandywine tomato. Kentucky Wonder. Blue Lake. They were my father's, she said. He was a city code inspector. He used to measure things. But he loved these. It is possible to hold two truths at once, that a person harmed you, and that they are more than the harm. Mercy is not blindness, it's depth perception. "Thank you," I said, and meant exactly those two words. She nodded, a small bow to the idea that there's a place after 4, even if you don't know the address yet. She didn't ask to plant them. She didn't ask for us to watch. She set the box on the garden's edge and left with the soft urgency of someone escaping before they change their own mind. We planted a few. They came up stubborn and sweet, like things that take a long time to apologize. Stories want endings. Life insists on continuations. The wind chimes keep writing the night in little silver sentences. The orange mailbox 2 houses down leans not out of negligence, but because the owner likes the way it looks when it's a little wrong. Children grow. Their bikes get bigger. Their chalk galaxies expand. The blue garage door fades to a version of itself that looks like it has learned something. Sometimes I take the long route home, past the house that used to carry a crown. The young couple added a porch swing. It complains happily when you sit on it, as if to say weight is not the same as burden. There are sunflowers that forgot the rules about height and stand with their faces up like a lesson. At night, the lights along their path hum a soft line from the street to the door, saying welcome without giving an order. I still keep the folders, not because I plan to use them, but because memory without proof can be rewritten by the loudest voice in the room. And because someday a neighbor's cousin will join a new HOA board somewhere else and ask, "How did Willow Ben fix it?" And I will have more than a speech. I will have a paper trail and a garden. If you have a Martha where you live, don't count your victories in decibels. Count them in timestamps. Count them in chairs pulled up at a table where you decide things together. Count them in the day you no longer flinch when the mail arrives. The world won't always give you a tow truck at the perfect time and a badge that glints justice. Most days you will get patience and a phone camera and a calendar and a neighbor who brings over chai just when you've forgotten what comfort tastes like. Some nights I sit with Sarah on the porch and we play the first game. First night the street felt easy again. First time someone didn't lower their voice on the sidewalk. First day Hank laughed out loud. First tomato from Martha's father's seeds. First Halloween with too many pumpkins and 0 measurements. First winter with lights left up in February on purpose. First spring where the grass wasn't a symbol. It was just grass. Do you miss anything? Sarah asked once, a sideways question, testing the air. From before? I asked. No, from the way you were while it was happening. The way you watched everything. I think about it. Surveillance makes you a poor neighbor to yourself. I miss believing things will fix themselves if I'm quiet, I say. But I don't want that back. She nods. She had learned the same thing at work in 100 bigger rooms. Documentation is love in hard shoes. You could make a list of all the ways Martha was wrong, and it would be long enough to hang laundry on. But if you only make lists of what you hated, you end up building a new cage. So we made a different list. The one where we wrote down what we wanted. Music at dusk, pain that made people's eyes crinkle, kindness that arrived unscheduled, children who thought rules were explanations, not punishments, and a mailbox that could be bright orange for no better reason than someone's heart needed a small sunrise at the curb. Sooner or later, every clipboard cracks. People think that's the ending. It isn't. It's the sound you hear right before you realize you can raise your hand for a vote instead of waiting for a verdict. On the anniversary of the day the city SUVs pulled in, we held a block dinner, tables in a row, foods that had arguments with each other, and then made up on the same plate. Someone played a guitar badly. It sounded perfect. Raj stood and thanked everyone for showing up for a year in which we learned to be people again. Tasha toasted the babysitting exchange that had given sleep back to the night shift. Hank promised to teach 3 more kids to ride before fall. We passed around a small envelope, Brandywine tomato seeds. I did not say whose they were. We didn't need to. Later, in the soft dark, the wind chimes edited the silence into something legible. The streetlights made coins of the road. If you listened, you could hear the kind of happiness that never shouts, because it doesn't need to convince anyone it exists. The mailbox at my curb leans a little. The numbers glow just enough. Every once in a while I catch myself checking whether they're compliant, and then I laugh out loud alone like a person who has remembered an old fear and found it empty. Here's a sentence I wish I could mail back in time to the man holding the first violation letter like a dead bird. She can't make you smaller if you keep telling the truth, one dated page at a time. And even if you lose a few skirmishes, something larger is listening. The garden, the porch swing, the chimes, the children practicing corners on their bikes, The night that forgives December lights left till March. The morning that forgives a lawn cut a week late. The neighbors who forgive each other for being human in public. If you've got a Martha, here's your script. Don't flinch. Don't shout unless it's to call someone in for dinner. Document. Share. Invite. Plant. Laugh where you were told to lower your voice. And when the day comes, and it will, when the clipboard cracks, don't dance on the pieces. Use them as plant markers in the garden you grew because you didn't have time to hate anyone forever. I still pass her house sometimes without meaning to. The swing still complains kindly. The sunflowers still refuse to apologize for their height. On those days, the wind chime gives one long, low note, as if the breeze itself were writing a closing line. You made a place where people live, not obey. Keep going. And we do.